This is the best cabinet that Modi could have come up with, given the talent pool that he had access to within the NDA scheme of things. This is a turnaround team, and does this Council of Ministers really clear the competency test? That's the big question we're asking here on ET now. And we've got a special panel joining us over the next 20-25 minutes. Swaminathan Aiyar, Keki Mistry, we've got Godrej, Punita, Kumar, Sinha, and NK Singh from the BJP. Swami, to you first. The big question, is this a turnaround team?
I have seen a large number of Bollywood films with a wonderful star cast, but the film is a flop. So I said, it depends on the director, it depends on what is the content, what is the execution. So let us see. So this is a start. We now know who are the guys who are going to be on board. The execution depends. On the execution depends everything. First, a few remarks. What an excellent thing that we have shrunk the number of ministries. What an excellent thing that we don't have a multitude of guys. Because as they say, in the coalition era, part of the dharma was everybody has to have a ministry. Why? Guess why? You have to make money, you have to have a patronage network. So, I mean, you were splitting up more and more departments, more and more, and the outcomes were intended to be adverse. The outcomes were not intended to be a greater efficiency or greater honesty. So, that is getting reversed. That is positive sign. Beyond that, when I see the large number of very important ministries which only has a minister of state, one gets the feeling of, my God, Modi's centralization tendencies are here. That in these very important things, he wants to have his own way. So there's only a minister of state, and he's going to have so much on his own plate. It's also very clear that he says, I'm not going to mess around with having various technocrats on my team. A cabinet is politics. It is politics in the United Kingdom, it's a politics in other places. Only in India we somehow have the idea that people like Monte Ahluwalia and Manmohan Singh should somehow be transplanted as technocrats in the cabinet, and he has gone back, and I think that is the right approach.
Ms. Mistry, what are your thoughts? You know, in terms of size, this is one of the smallest cabinets we've ever seen. What's your view on this lean look that the cabinet sports? Do you believe it will help build perhaps more efficiency?
I think it will bring in more efficiency. One is it will bring in more efficiency, and two, it will make it much more easier to be a cohesive decision-making body rather than have a very large number of people where decision-making becomes that much more difficult. So in that sense, the smaller it is, the better it is.
Mr. Godrej, let's talk about the important portfolio of finance. Finance, even corporate affairs to some, is now been merged with the finance ministry, and it goes to Arun Jaitley. Is he the best man for this job, according to you?
I think the move to merge corporate affairs with the same cabinet minister as finance is a good move, because there needs to be a lot of coordination between the two ministries. And of course, Arun Jaitley is, I think, extremely well suited to take charge of that ministry.
Arun Jaitley is well suited for that charge. But the big question, of course, is that he's also been given charge of another crucial portfolio, and that's defense. Let's bring in Mr. NK Singh. Arun Jaitley in charge of defense and finance, two very important portfolios. Is this a stopgap arrangement? Surely this is not a wise move, Mr. Singh. What's your view?
Well, defense needs some immediate firefighting action, because I think defense ministry went in a deep slumber in the last 5 years, particularly when the entire effort was how not to have a scam instead of how to modernize and equip India's defense capability in a manner which would be credible and which would be well respected. So I think that defense needs some very quick shake-up. But of course, budget making requires balancing many complexities. I have no doubt that Mr. Arun Jaitley is quite aware, as is Mr. Modi, on the need to take some decisive action which can put India's growth trajectory back to a much higher growth trajectory than what we have experienced as sub 5%. I think that some of the steps which I'm sure would be really begin to get reflected in the budget, of which I think the first preliminary indications would come in the joint address of the President to the two houses of Parliament, and that would be the foundation stone for the budget. But I am quite sanguine that the budget will substantially reverse expectations, it would inject confidence, it would lead to green shoots of investment, and it would begin the long haul of reviving India as a credible and as an attractive investment destination.
Swami, defense as well as finance for Jaitley. So for all practical purposes, he's really the #2 man in the Modi government. Is that how you're seeing it as well?
Once upon a time, the Home Minister was regarded as number 2. But as we discovered, the moment the Congress no longer ruled the states, the Home Minister could say anything to the state governments and they just wouldn't obey. They were frankly almost helpless. So it was pitiful that, Indrajit Gupta, whom I once respected, he became Home Minister. I said, what are you doing about the police commission reforms? And he replied, I wrote to all the chief ministers and only 2 of them replied and they both said no. So, this is the pathetic state of affairs of a man who was supposed to be the second most important man. So, definitely it moved to finance and being driven home doubly. Secondly, the question that you raised, is he the best man? Finance Minister must be a political heavyweight. The important thing is not do you read all the files and do you make all the decisions. There are plenty of technocrats for that. If you go back to that last NDA thing, you had a situation where Mr. Yashwant Sinha would do all this detailed work, burn the midnight oil. Here are the proposals. And when there was a ruckus, he would begin to roll back. One after, he was called Rollback Sinha. And what could he do, poor man? He was not a political heavyweight. It was a coalition. They had to listen to other people. When Jaitley says something, there is no question of his having to roll back anything. He should say, I am going to give tough medicine here, and I am afraid the country is going to take it, and we will reap the rewards of this 2 years from now. He is strong enough politically to do that. So we require a finance minister with the political clout to dish out tough medicine. And for that, Jaitley is the right man at this time.
Okay, Jaitley is the right man, says Swami. But Punita, let's talk about, the burden of expectations now on Modi and company. We all know that expectations are sky high. How are you reacting to the names that we've seen today?
Well, I think we probably have time to test the cabinet over the coming months, particularly starting with the budget, which is coming up pretty soon. So, depending on what kind of measures are taken in the budget, I think that will send a signal as to how this government is going to operate going forward. But as you saw from the market reaction today, the market was obviously factoring in perhaps more radical changes to the formation of the government as, leading up to the announcement. There was a lot of press coverage on what the cabinet could look like, and this is different than what the expectations perhaps were built up in the media. And to that extent, I think perhaps the markets were disappointed because maybe they were expecting a more radical shift this time around to the cabinet versus the previous governments. So in that sense, the cabinet looks, other than the size, it looks relatively similar.
That's the point, isn't it? It is a disappointment, especially if you consider the expectation that was being built in. Mr. N.K. Singh, comment on that. A lot of fresh faces, not many of them, are the ones with experience. Is this a council of ministers that has cleared the competency test, or is it only a council of ministers who've got portfolios because they are loyal to Modi, they're close to Modi, and they're backed by the Prime Minister?
I wouldn't say that. After all, the Prime Minister is the one under whose leadership this election has been fought. It is under Mr. Narendra Modi's leadership that this extraordinary mandate has been secured. And I think that it would not be inappropriate, therefore, to draw the conclusion that he would want to pick on people on whose ability to perform more than the narrow sense of loyalty was the guiding characteristic. I have seen Piyush Goyal speak in the Rajya Sabha on complex subjects. There's a great amount of homework, domain knowledge, which Piyush has exhibited in all the debates in which I have seen him successively participate. I've seen Prakash participate on environmental issues, making very credible interventions which have brought in fresh issues. I've seen Smriti doing similarly a lot of background work and homework. So I have every reason to believe that the selection of these people was a careful consideration, not in terms of their narrow loyalty to him, but in what value they will bring to the table in terms of managing these complex ministries, where they will use their energy, they will use their ability to do good research, and that they will perform in a manner which will secure the most optimum outcomes which we all expect.
Okay. Let's get into possibly a critical view. Swaminathan Aiyar, comment on that, Swami. Do you think that some of these portfolios have been given purely because of political compulsions? That they had to be people like Kalraj Mishra who had to be accommodated in the cabinet, and in a sense, loyalists have been rewarded.
It's one thing to run a state government, which is a relatively small, compact area, and it's an area where the Chief Minister has the ability to appoint, discipline and transfer every official. He's the hands-on. But if you're a Prime Minister here, you can't transfer a single official in any state government. You can't do anything about the police. Your powers are frankly quite limited. Now you do of course have powers over defense or foreign affairs or international trade, but that is a very small part of the totality of the reality the Aam Aadmi is facing. The Aam Aadmi actually is in directly contact only or 90% only with the state government, not the central government. So for him to say, let me once again say, let us have a highly centralized thing and I have guys around me who will then give orders and we will be able to run the country, I think that would fail. I hope he does not try to do that. I hope on the other hand, he says that these new fellows who have come, let us give them a chance to grow in their own job. He would have his own ideas. And God knows how many PowerPoint presentations he must have already seen. And he will probably say, this is now through, now go and run with it. Finally, I think you need to get away from the idea that ministers have to take all the decisions. There's a classic Western idiom in which you say the minister decides the policy and all the approvals are then done by the civil servants. That is the original thing. Now suddenly we want all the approvals to be done by ministers or by cabinet committees. That is not the way a smooth democracy functions. I mean, there will be exceptional cases which would go up to the minister or to the cabinet, but the norm should be that you set the policy and the bureaucrats go ahead and do it. So if you're trying to run India, I think you need to do it that old conventional way, individual ministerial discretion or Prime Minister running everything. I do not think are models that will work.
Since we are talking about conventional ways, Punita, how do you think the market would read some of these crucial economic portfolios and the way they've been aligned? The oil ministry has to take a call on the contentious gas price, but you've given it to a relatively unknown person in Dharmendra Pradhan. Punita, we will just come to you in just a bit, but Mr. Singh, I want to ask you the same question. Many were expecting an integrated energy portfolio. Instead, we've got 4 independent ministries, ministers rather. Would you say somewhere that this is perhaps a sign of the fact that the last call on, say, something as contentious as the gas price hike lies with Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister?
You have, after a very long time, brought coal and power under the same Minister of State. This is not an insignificant step because I think that the modernization of India's coal sector and the modernization and improvement of productivity in India's coal economy has a significant bearing on the way in which the balance of payments is going to be reflected. We are large importers of coal, and if there is huge domestic availability and reserves of coal, which on account of very flawed policies we have not been able to optimize on. There is shortage of coal, which does not enable power stations to run at optimum capacity, and I think that bringing them together in many ways is a step which is trying to seek the virtuous circles between coal and power production. Now, combining that, if you are suggesting with petroleum ministry, would have become an increasingly unmanageable charge because looking at the way in which the challenges of petroleum have to deal not only with seeking increased availability of crude for meeting our needs, it has a lot to do also with how to improve the exploration, the acreage, how to enter into the most optimum international agreements, and how to really optimize public-private partnership. I think there is a huge learning curve in how to manage public-private partnership. One of the manifestation of that is the manner in which we have gone about fixing the price of gas, domestic gas, misaligned with the markets, misaligned with the price at which imported gas is available. So I think that there are enough challenges which are inherent in the management of the oil economy which have both the national and international ramifications, and it would have become too much to perhaps combine it with coal and power.
Mr. Mistry, my question is now for you. What do you suppose will be, on top of the agenda for the finance minister? To your mind, which areas should he be concentrating on the most?
I would say there are several issues. There are probably 10 to 12 issues, but if I was to name just 5 of those 10, and I can name more if you want, I would say the first and foremost is we have to resolve this whole issue around taxation. Now, there is so much of concern, particularly amongst foreign investors, on high-pitched assessments, retrospective amendments to tax laws, GHAR, and so on and so forth. Vodafone is a stickler unnecessarily. It's there in people's mind when they come to look at investing in India. So I think on the taxation side, I would say two things to look at. One is simplify tax laws, resolve all the old disputes, particularly the ones which relate to foreign companies. So give the confidence back to the system to start looking at investing. And two, as far as domestic taxpayers are concerned, reduce the tax rate but improve the compliance. There are, I'm told, only 43,000 individuals who report a taxable income in excess of 1 crore of rupees. Now that, to my mind, is totally unacceptable. And we have to increase the compliance levels, lower the tax rates, which will encourage more people to come to the tax net and pay taxes. So these are the two issues around taxation. The second issue revolves around, I would say, creation of infrastructure. So if you look at India in the last several years, inflation in India is persistent. Inflation comes, inflation goes, but inflation keeps coming back. And the reason it keeps coming back is because there are certain structural supply side issues which need to be addressed. Now these supply side issues, if we were to address these supply side issues, we need to make some real serious investment in infrastructure.
Let's get a word from Mr. Godrej as well. Mr. Godrej, what do you think are the key challenges for the finance minister? What do you think he needs to focus on first up?
Well, I think first he has to revive the economy. The finance ministry will have to ensure that GDP growth gets to at least 8% for the next financial year. A lot of action needs to be taken. The good thing is there are lots of possibilities. There must be a stimulus provided to industry. Industrial growth is extremely poor. Ease of doing business must be improved. And the terrible perception we have created among foreign investors with retrospective tax amendments and the various action taken on transfer pricing needs to be quickly reversed. I think if all these things are attended to at an early date, I think the Indian GDP growth can be accelerated very early.
Mr. Mistry, let you have the last word there. Let's talk about markets. A lot of money has already started flowing in from foreign institutional investors. But what does the government really need to do to ensure that the party doesn't get spoiled and this momentum, so to say, continues from here on?
I think the issues that I talked about, if some of these issues are addressed, I think that will create so much of confidence amongst overseas institutional investors that we will continue to see more money coming into India. I keep talking to investors all the time, and I know that most investors are extremely fascinated or extremely comfortable, extremely happy with the kind of formidable election results that we've had, the strong government that we have. It would be a decisive government, and if they are able to implement some of these measures that the market is looking at, I think the quantum of money coming into India will only keep increasing over time.
All right, we'll leave it at that. I'm afraid we'll have to wind up this discussion. All of you, many thanks for taking time out for us this evening and really walking us through your viewpoint of Narendra Modi's cabinet and what you think really holds in store for them.